Hi, everyone. This is Jackson Steger, and you're listening to Campfire, a new limited series podcast from Gavin. Campfire is a show that seeks to understand how decentralized organizations achieve wildly ambitious and creative goals. Each week, we're joined by DAO leaders and operators who share the tips, tricks, and tactics that they have used to build community and ship product. Today's guests are Nick deWilde and Rockwell Shah, co-founders of Invisible College, which is a learning DAO that onboards builders and creators into web3. Our discussion today centers on what a school looks like when it's owned by its students. This university of the future, as they call themselves, benefits from the blockchain's unique ability to help students and teachers tie the right incentives to learning outcomes. We talk about course selection, finding teachers, co-creating curriculum, and much, much more in between. For those of you who are insatiably curious, get your notebooks out, because class is in session. Let's get it. Nick and Rockwell, welcome to Campfire. We're psyched to have you.
Thanks for having us, Jackson.
This is great.
Gonna go ahead and start with a two-parter. So the first is, what is Invisible College? And then the second piece is a little more high level. What will the world look like in 5 to 10 years if Invisible College is successful in its mission?
Invisible College is a Web3 university. It's the university of the future. And when we think about why Invisible College, I think we have to think about more broadly, why blockchain, why crypto? And there's something that we talk about in Invisible College, which is, there's this quote from Charlie Munger, "Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes." And what he's talking about in the quote is that everything that we see around us, everything that manifests, is really coming from an underlying incentive structure. And if you understand that incentive structure, you can understand the outcomes that will rise out of that. And one of the incredible things about crypto is that it's really programmable incentives. It gives us the infrastructure to program outcomes that we want to see arise in the world. And ultimately, the infrastructure is neutral, though. You can program things that are good or bad or anything in between. And it's up to us to make good outcomes. And we at our core believe that we can only do that if we have really great educational infrastructure to power those good outcomes. And I think both Nick and myself were pretty frustrated with our university experiences and the kinds of practical things that we could get out of the education system. And when we're thinking about rebuilding that experience for the present and specifically for crypto, learning just looks different than what you traditionally see in education. And Nick, I think you have a really great perspective on problems in education and ways to solve those problems with crypto infrastructure.
Yeah, so I've been in the education world for most of my career, so at least since 2015. And I think a lot of people inherently believe that the problem around education is content. But it's, if you just think about it for a second, it's so clearly not. The content is so abundant. If content were the problem and maybe free access to content, we could solve the problem of education with free library cards. But we can't. And if you think on why that is, there's something interesting, right? Like, it's clear that it's out there. YouTube, there are all these places where you can find good content. It's never been easier, in fact. But we live in a world where there is so much distraction, from Twitter to Netflix to everything. And I'm not one of these free will, pull yourself up by your bootstraps people. I really just think it's like we live in an environment where it is really hard to concentrate and do hard things. What gets me excited at Web3 is that it supplies the thing that is rarest in education, which is motivation. When the first time that we invested into an NFT project, we saw this insane hype within the community as people revealed their NFTs and traded and swapped and collected. And it was such a kind of fun, exciting moment for so many people. And we just recognized attaching that with education and kind of putting those things together, putting that instinct to collect, to own, to play, to create. That was what was missing out of a lot of education. You can have all the sort of video courses in the world, but if there isn't motivation to really take them and jump into it, then it's tough. And I think when you're thinking about learning Web3, it's both a really lucrative and valuable thing to learn and figure out, but it's also a really high stakes thing to figure out. You can click on the wrong link and get your MetaMask drained. And that's a really painful moment. We've lost someone from Web3. It's really hard to bring somebody back then. And so we clearly saw that not only are Web3 mechanics really useful for education, Web3 is something that people are inherently motivated to learn. And it's also hard to learn, and it's high stakes to learn. And so all those things just geared us towards we should be doing something really interesting in this space. When we thought about the idea of pairing an NFT with a school, there's something really interesting that happens. When you look at new people and why they're uncomfortable buying their first NFT, and I talk to some people about it, it really comes down to they don't want the floor to drop out from under them. They don't want to have spent a bunch of money on toads and penguins and then have to go tell their significant other that we can't go on vacation this year because all my toads and penguins are worthless and we have no more discretional spending money, right? They want something that is sturdy. And what typically happens with NFT projects is their peak value is at the point of mint, because that's when there's the most hype and promise of the future. And when you compare an NFT with something that doesn't just have utility, I'm doing air quotes, but real utility, real value, what happens is there becomes a logical case to be made that the value of that NFT and what it can access only goes up over time. That's a really powerful thing. And then if you flip it, right? And then suddenly you're talking about, okay, why is it valuable to put courses and gate them with an NFT? If you're like me, you've probably at some point bought a course. And if you go check out your Udemy account, you have many of these. You bought a Udemy course on a $10 sale, which they seem to have every single day. And you have never taken it, you never touched it, and now you just have this course sitting in your basket and you're not going to do anything with it. With an NFT, you can actually resell your access to the community, to the courses, to all the things that Invisible College produces. Imagine if you could resell access to your alma mater to somebody new. One, that changes the incentives of the institution to make sure that you are continually getting value out of your membership. And if you're not, then you should sell. And it doesn't always mean it has to be an adversarial thing. It could be just you've hit a point where you no longer need what that community can offer. But at that point, for being early, you should be able to sell your access to it. Maybe you can rent it out to other people, right? There's all sorts of ways that an NFT can provide really powerful access to a membership community. I think that those were some of the things that got us really jazzed about it. And Rock, maybe I'll hand it back to you to talk about how you think about what got you excited about the future and all that.
Yeah, I've built a lot of things in my career. And one of the experiences you have as a builder in Web 2 is you create something, you offer it for free, you gain users, people love what you're doing. And then at some point, you have to flip the monetization switch to make it sustainable. And when you do that, people get really mad and they think that you stabbed them in the back. They want to throw you off of a bridge. They get very angry and upset about it. And they say, I've been here since the beginning. I've, had brought so many people into this product or this community. How could you do this to me? Web3 offers a solution to that problem. If you're a NFT holder or a token holder early to a project and it becomes successful, you can see that upside. All the people that you brought into the community as the project appreciates and therefore the token appreciates, you benefit. And there's something really powerful in flipping that equation. And specifically for Invisible College, our NFTs are the tuition to the university. And as the college becomes more valuable, the NFTs become more valuable. And of course, there are problems to think about and solve around as the NFTs become more valuable, then your tuition is more expensive. How do you ensure accessibility to the school for all sorts of folks? And we have lots of infrastructure laid down for that specifically, which we can talk about. But ultimately, what you really want is to align the incentives of the community that over time, as the school becomes more and more prosperous, so too does its community.
So what a great start. And there's a bunch of different things you all said that I want to double click on a little bit. For folks who are newer to Web3, they see these, you mentioned toads and penguins, these campaigns of different images for NFTs. And I think at the beginning, it can be hard to separate the artwork and the lore of a project from its value. And so I'm curious, in your development of Invisible College and building out the Decentraliens, how is it that NFT profile pictures and just the lore associated, how does that enable community cohesion? And how did you think about developing that NFT strategy?
Before you go deep into that, I think it's probably worthwhile to tell the audience, because they might not know. the Decentraliens are the NFT collection that's associated with Invisible College. And Nick, you want to give a rundown on just the background and the lore of the Decentraliens to provide context?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to. So the Decentraliens are from a planet not so unlike our own, but from far away. And they come from a time when technology has given individuals almost godlike power. A repressive government has come in and taken over their home planet and used surveillance, censorship, and intimidation in order to create order. And the Decentraliens are this rebellious band of aliens that escape their home planet to found Invisible College, which is a new society based on free expression, creative exploration, and community sovereignty. And there are different types of Decentraliens. There's the government figures, the precepts. There are the bounty hunter bots. There are the paladins that protect the Decentraliens. And you may be asking, so why have a big lore? We're building a school, right? Ultimately, it kind of comes back to a few things, right? Like, motivation is important, right? Story, fun, it matters. Like when you were a kid, how did you learn? You played computer games like Math Blaster and Number Munchers and Organ Trail, right? Like those are things that the first time I saw an NFT project, it was just so clear that's what this is for adults. And it may sound like I'm dismissive of toads and penguins. I'm actually not. I really truly think that NFTs and the profile picture art scene is an incredibly dynamic scene that is global, where you have people creating a medium before our eyes on a global stage and watching each other and playing off each other and tweaking things. And it's awesome to watch. And it does something special, which is really important when it comes to community, which we used to. There's a book called Bowling Alone that was written in the late 90s. And it talks all about how we used to belong to lots of small organizations. We used to be part of our labor union or the church or the Rotary Club. And over time, actually, we've withdrawn, at least Americans have withdrawn their membership from a lot of those organizations. And what that means is like our identities get flattened. And so no longer are you Jackson, who belongs to, who's the president of the Rotary Club. And maybe you're a mechanic for your job. And maybe you didn't go to college, but you're someone at this organization, and that's what matters. But now, like when we withdraw from those places and we don't have little leadership roles in the PTA and things like that, it means that we are basically what we are on our LinkedIn profile. And it means that what school you went to and what prestigious companies you're at is your identity. It determines your number of Twitter followers, and which determines your status on the wide open ocean of the internet. And that sucks. And you can see that because you can see people on Twitter, right? Like banging out these like threads in order to like get someone to pay attention to them and listen to them and hear their voice and hear what they have to say and hear that's important. And it's like, I think it's a sad state of affairs that we don't talk about enough. But what in these profile picture communities are an opportunity for people to do a little bit of like an identity reset. For someone we have a bunch of folks in Invisible College who are in their 60s. And I know because they've told me, and they haven't said it out loud, but like they've said to Rockwell or I, they said, hey, I'm 60-year-old. This is the first NFT I minted. There's no way I would know that if they hadn't told me, because they have Decentraliens as their profile pictures. And they have a status within the community because they are helpful to other people. They care. They do things for us on Twitter. They are really important members of the community. We have 18-year-olds. I'm sure we have people who are 17, 16, right? Like the spread is wide, but you have all these people who like, they get an opportunity to sort of build an identity within a community. And as that community rises and is successful, that identity can go on to allow them to build an audience and get all sorts of economic opportunities. And I think that really matters. And then you have that on top of the natural fun that just happens in these profile picture communities. So I really do think it's something special, and it's easy to dismiss. And there are certainly all sorts of cash grabs and silly kind of Me Too derivative projects. But I think there's something underlying it that's really special.
I love that answer. So as folks subscribe to this lore, they become mission aligned, and that the creative free expression that the Decentralian story tells is something that resonates with them, and they do wind up acquiring this NFT. What are then the like tactical pieces, or what is the utility received in the context of Invisible College for holding this NFT? What is the access and the abilities that a member of Invisible College now has?
So one of the incredible things I think about Invisible College is what an amazing job the leadership team has done in providing events, programming, curriculum. So almost every day in Invisible College, we have something interesting going on. Usually on Mondays, I'll teach a tokenomics lesson. Tuesdays, we have faculty members, Jake and Zach, who are world-class designers who work at really amazing Web2 firms, but they're just incredible UX, UI, front-end engineers are doing something called Zach and Jake Fix Web3, where I think it's a common joke that the user experience of Web3 and crypto is pretty bad. And there's a lot of things that Web3 can learn from Web2. And Jake and Zach do a great job, running that session and giving you insights into how designers think about building products from the very basics. And that's been a really fun series. On Wednesday, Nick actually does interviews with really interesting folks. And he recently interviewed Suhail from Gumroad, and that was just incredible. But he's had, of course, some of the guests, Gabby.
Yeah, we've had Mario Gabriel talking about Foxes, had Gabby Goldberg talking about investing in Web3. We've had recently talked with Joey DeBruin about Backdrop, and Sari is out talking about modern billboards. So we like to talk to builders who are creating things because, frankly, the journey that we're trying to take people on in Web 2, the journey tends to be you start out being a builder and then you hopefully hit it big and earn enough money to reach the bar to become an accredited investor. And in Web 3, it's the opposite. You actually, in order to use almost any product in Web 3, you've got to invest $1 in it. And so you start out as an investor because the bar is kind of low there. And you start to play around, you start to see all the things that are wrong with Web 3 and all the bad user experiences, et cetera. And then you become a builder. And so we're basically trying to build a school that kind of takes people along that journey. Some courses and events and community sessions that we do are about investing. Some are about building, some are about both. But really, it's trying to aid people along that journey in wherever it gets them excited.
So in that day-to-day building of a school, Rockwell mentions this tokenomics course. There's other courses depending on the day. How are the topics and the courses for learning selected? And how do you find faculty to teach these courses?
Yeah, good question. At the moment, we started on day one when we launched in December, started doing courses. And we tried all sorts of stuff. We tried some that were just straight from the community. We tried some that were from the faculty. We've taken ideas from the community. But I think the ultimate goal is we want this school to be owned and operated by the students. But what we recognize is that the first most important thing is that there's a ton of value that comes from your membership in the community. And so when we sort of rank order our priorities, it's like number one rank is it's somewhat a Web 2 thing, right? Are the customers happy with what's happening? And what we'd like is for more and more for the students who are the owners of NFTs to be giving classes and things like that. But we also recognize that as, faculty and as the founders, we somewhat have to set the tone on this. So we have to put it by showing that we're putting in a ton of work. We have one of our members, Surf KT, does DeFi Friday. And I think one sort of evolution I've seen is as faculty have come in and put more and more work into our sessions, his sessions have just gotten so good. He did a What You Can Do with DeFi event last Friday. It was incredible. I think in order to get people to put in the work needed to deliver a really high quality session or course, we have to set the tone and the example. And I think that kind of infuses the culture into the org of high standards. And I think that's really important. Where I think sometimes what happens in DAOs is it's the community decided this. And so thus it is what goes. And here we are, right? And I think that's okay. But ultimately, it's people will end up leaving because what we don't have in DAOs is there's nothing sticky about it. And we've designed it that way. People belong to 10 of them. You can jump from one to the other. And so if you're not doing really high quality stuff, then you won't have the opportunity to have it be community run. Because frankly, people will just get up and leave. And so I think we're probably a little bit more on the side right now as we're a startup like any other startup, right? We're finding product market fit. And as we find that product market fit, it's really important that we make the right decisions about what to put in our programming and all sorts of things. And I think over time, as we get more comfortable with that, then there are many more points where we can sort of decentralize. But we don't see decentralization as a net good in itself. We see there's a goal, and if we can use this to hit it, then it's a great tool in our tool belt.
I think that's a really mature approach, and it complements the last episode that we recorded. We had Julia Lipton come on, and she's been running an awesome program at DAO Masters, and they're a little older, so you can see that this progressive decentralization has happened effectively, and it's exciting to see that you're thinking about that intentionally. I'm curious, but when someone goes to your website and they click on vision, there's this awesome map. And on the map, there's a headmaster's office and an AV club, a cafeteria, a lecture hall. I'm about to ask because Balaji, he's a strategic partner in Creator Cabins, and he's just announced this book, The Network State, about these cloud-first communities that form online, but then can potentially manifest a real place, a real physical place. Have you two talked at all about manifesting a real campus, and why or why not?
I think there are going to be some deals to be had on abandoned college campuses in the future.
Why do you say that? What makes you think that college campuses will be abandoned?
Maybe not abandoned. I think what will naturally happen with universities is there are going to be some that where a big portion of the value you get is just by being admitted and by getting the diploma and the brand. And those schools will stick around because brand is rare, and really good brands are really rare and they're really hard to copy. There are also schools that are really exceptional at doing scalable online education. So I used to work for Guild Education, and they work with a lot of these schools that really see their mandate, whether it's Purdue, University of Southern New Hampshire. These are high quality, low cost schools. And what they do well is they are really good at creating education and distributing it at scale. And they have their campus because of course they do, right? That's where they started. But I don't think all these schools will need it. Now, they may always keep it as just part of their mission and mandate. And there are all these schools in the middle who some are, I think liberal arts schools, there is something special about them. And I think some will stick around, but there are probably too many colleges that have too bloated of a business model, and that eventually something needs to happen and change with them. Now, the question of would we buy one of these campuses and then create a very bloated business model too? I don't know. Like maybe we just start by buying some urban centers that are fun for people just to meet and have events. But I think, and it could be that we create a digital space that just feels really cool and fun to be able to attend events at. But I think it is fun to show a sort of physical space and give people a mental map for what we're building. And so I think those things are all in the cards. And that's probably something that by the time we're able to decide that, we're decentralized enough that that's a big community decision.
So I love that answer. For both of your thoughts here, 2 days ago, Mark Andreessen, he tweeted, he had overheard this somewhere in Silicon Valley. He said, "The modern university is a political madrasa married to a trade school, married to a hedge fund, married to a sports team, married to an adult daycare center, married to a Visa law firm." So as you're building Invisible College, which parts of a bundled university do you think are important to keep, and which do you think you can do away with, especially in your early days?
I think there's something like important about when people want to disrupt universities. Like so many people have tried disrupting the university, but there's something incredibly sticky about it. And if I had to describe what I think that is, the universities have a belief network effect. And really what that is, when you tell your parents or your friends or someone, I'm going back to school, or I'm going to school, I'm going to college, everybody understands what that means, and they cut you some slack. And they say, hey, you're still figuring out what you want, I get it, or you have a goal and you're going to hit it, but it gives you permission to do a whole bunch of different things. It gives you permission to make friends again. It gives you permission to go learn and study and dig into something that you care about. It's very hard to replicate that. I think that I'm going to go take a bunch of online courses, right? It just doesn't have the same effect. People look at you, they say, what are you doing? You're drifting, even though you may be paying 90% less. There's something psychological that's really challenging about that. So when I think about education, I think a lot of people in education don't really understand what business they're in. They think they're in the learning business, but really learning is either somebody wants to do something with that knowledge or those skills, or it's an excuse to do something. When I think of Invisible College, I think the things that we're really geared towards are like, we want to help people leverage Web3 to be able to improve their lives. And to some degree, like the way it's improved my life is I've built a network of people who I really love spending time with and I have really heady, interesting conversations with. It's grown my bank account. It's allowed me to take the leap into building. It's allowed me to marry my love of creativity and storytelling. My first career was a screenwriter, like with my enjoyment of building community. It's done a lot of really powerful things for me. And so when I think about what we want to do with Invisible College, we want to take Web3 and allow people to build these really energizing livelihoods with it. Whether that's, for some people, that's contributing to Invisible College. For some people, that's building their own projects. For some people, that's investing in something that's really exciting and allows them the runway to go build the thing they want to build. But I think if we stay really committed to that kind of North Star, that will inform all the other decisions we make. And maybe we at some point become good at getting people visas, or we become that adult daycare center. I don't know, but as long as it's in service of those missions, like, I think that's probably, to me, the North Star for us. I don't know what you think, Rock.
For me, I think about this formula: learn, build, launch. So you come to Invisible College to learn about Web3, to learn about cryptocurrency and blockchain. You find other human beings that you enjoy spending time with. You build something together and you launch it out of Invisible College. And frankly, Invisible College helps you do that. In fact, we had our first launch of the very first project that came out of Invisible College called Starship Guild. It raised $2 million in 3 days, basically a weekend. And it was very successful. That was even before we ever launched the Decentralien collection. We had our first project launch before we even had the NFT launch for the college.
Could I interrupt for a second to ask,
Sure.
In launching Starship, what is the infrastructure that the Invisible College has in place? Maybe is that Launchpad, and do you want to talk about how exactly you're supporting someone like the Starship project?
Yeah, the most special element or one of the most special elements of Invisible College is the community. And we have incredible people as part of the IC community, really high quality people that as part of the Launchpad, you can bring them into the story, you can bring them into the narrative, you can get exposure for your project. And we actually have dedicated channels inside of Invisible College for different projects, including Starship Guild. And so people can follow along on project updates and understand like what kind of progress is being made. And they can see the inner workings, right? Because ultimately people want to be part of narratives. They want to be part of stories. And if you bring them into the story, if you bring them into the narrative and you show them what's possible, then there's a decent chance they'll invest. And that's the beginnings of the Launchpad with IC, is tapping into that broader community of thousands of people that want to support interesting missions and interesting dreams to manifest and come to life. And that was definitely the case with Starship Guild. And we're really incredibly appreciative of the IC community for supporting us in that. And so the Launchpad is going to evolve and develop over time. We have a working group of community members that are dedicated to iterating on it and making it better. And in fact, we've seen just really great progress in that working group. They're doing user interviews. They're understanding where people are in their journey of being entrepreneurs in Web3. Like, what kind of resources do they need? It's easy to make assumptions, but when you actually talk to people, and they've done dozens of interviews at this point to understand what the IC community really wants, you get a much better picture of what we should be building and how we should be building it. And so they've done a really great job in that. And I'm really excited to see how the Launchpad evolves over time. But yeah, it would be easy to make comparisons of saying IC is going to be the Y Combinator of Web3 or these types of things. But ultimately, what a startup school looks like, what a university looks like, what a job, even a job board looks like in Web3 and the future is going to evolve and change. And IC is on that frontier, figuring that formula out, where people can come, they can gather in these groups, find their people, build the projects of their dreams and launch. And we can be there to help them.
I'm glad we've talked about Launchpad now a little bit. We've talked about some of the courses that Invisible College offers. Going back just to this campus map analogy, there's a few other properties that you've outlined here. There's community learning events and there's educational media. So I want to dive into that second one a little bit more. I think we touched on events a bit. So you've launched a weekly newsletter called The Syllabus, and the syllabus is really cool. It deep dives into a different Web3 project each week. I recommend that if listeners enjoy this podcast, I think you'd also enjoy reading the syllabus. So what are some other channels that you think about from a media perspective for delivering educational content to your audience?
Yeah, the way we think about it is there's different levels of media that we're producing, right? There are going to be some things that are going to be behind the quote unquote paywall of an NFT. There's some things that are going to be free for NFT holders, but will be publicly accessible and will be a revenue source for the school. So for example, if we do a self-serve course that is really extensive, we'll offer that for free to our members. And then we'll offer it as a paid product on a more public basis. There will also, and again, that's a way where like we can tangibly say, hey, your NFT is more valuable because it accesses these things that cost this much money. And so we want to be able to like show that tangibly. But we also want to do things that are just free for the community and also just give people a sample and taste of some of the stuff that we're thinking about. And so the newsletter is one of them. We think the syllabus, I have a newsletter, and many of the people who are core contributors to Invisible College, to me, there's so much in Web3, there's just so much information. There's so many things you could be looking at any one moment. And being able to narrow down the world for people is probably the most useful thing that we can do. So being able to pick a project that is interesting and dive deeply into it and be able to explain its underlying mechanics and why it's interesting from a pretty basic level, we think is great, because ultimately the way people get into Web3, I just don't think it's like reading the Bitcoin white paper is great and everyone should do it at some point. But like usually you don't get in first by reading the Bitcoin white paper. That usually bogs people down. Like usually everyone has some coworker that's, oh, you're into Web3. Well, explain to me how a blockchain works. And you don't have to know that right away. You should at some point eventually know it. It's more often you get excited about music NFTs or a crypto covens and you're like, this is awesome. Creator cabins, you're like, man, this is such a cool idea. There's so much creativity here. I should get involved. And as you do, you learn more about it. So we see the syllabus as it's a break-in point for people. The next big educational media property that we want to launch is a YouTube channel. And what we have on our staff is our secret weapon is a guy named Paul. And Paul is an incredible videographer. He can produce some of the like highest quality, thoughtful, well-explained videos in a very short period of time. And he's also just like incredibly personable and kind. And he's been doing our community updates. And we're like, hey, we should really be having you work on building more educational media. We're currently working with him on a YouTube channel. That's something that'll be live soon. We're also going to be doing public events. So in April, Rockwell's doing a Tokenomics 101 event, which we can share the link for, but we will include signups for that. And so we'll be doing some events that are beyond the paywall. I think we take the typical kind of strategy around this is you have the entry-level events that are general and open to the public. And then for depth, you come to the community and you go much deeper. So that's at least how we're thinking about it at the moment. Again, that'll be an evolving thing, but those are things that we're excited about for educational media.
I love that. There's so many questions now. For listeners, I told Rock and Nick at the top that, oh yeah, we probably won't go the full hour. And yet here you are saying all these interesting things and prompting so many follow-ups. So I'm curious for both of you who have had these awesome past careers that predate Web3. As an organization, how are you thinking about things like goals and KPIs, both just in setting them, but then also getting member buy-in? You mentioned this like early need to be a little bit top down, but how do you get that member buy-in to agree on those KPIs, to work towards them as a community? How do you align people to a vision when there's so much noise in Discord?
Oh, wow. It's just such a great question. And in IC, a lot of what arises in IC is organic. So you have the 5 faculty members that started Invisible College. And below that, you have a leadership layer of folks that actually run the college day to day. And those leaders arose from the community. Those were Nick talked about. Paul just put out a summary update video of the weekly happenings in Invisible College one day. And I remember the moment Nick texted me this link to this video, check this out. And I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, this was just incredible production quality. And we never asked Paul to do it. He was just inspired by the community. There's another gentleman, Lyle, who is our community lead. And Lyle was just there when Invisible College launched in the intro channel, just talking to people and greeting them when they came into the Discord. And that's one of the things that you'll notice about IC is that when you actually join the Discord, there's a dedicated channel where you introduce yourself, and people like Lyle will be there to give you a soft landing and say, hey, check out these channels based on your interests. And we never asked Lyle to do that. He just did it. And these are the folks that are part of the leadership team that are guiding Invisible College that just put the work in without ever asking for anything in return. And I think that's one of the most important things, especially in early stage communities, that you can do is identify who are those folks that are really dedicated and amplifying them. Because it's one thing to sit down and try to put to paper some arbitrary KPIs of what you want to happen. It's another thing to just recognize what's happening in your community and amplifying that. And I think that's been a really important part of our formula and part of our own success is identifying those community members organically that are driving the community forward.
And I think Rock painted it in a really good way. And I think the thing we're now thinking about is, okay, so we did a pretty good job of elevating this group of just evangelists and devotees who really jumped in and started running with us and taking on leadership before we even had any sort of structure. They really saved our butts, I would say. Now the question is, okay, there's all these people who want to contribute. And how do we find ways for them to contribute in ways that don't pull us in 25 directions? Because there is no early stage startup who succeeds that is doing 50 different things at once. And we're already doing a lot of things at once, but at least it has some coherent plan. But so I think right now, what will typically happen, our leadership team, along with the faculty, because we're in the moment where we're transitioning from, we had a successful NFT launch. We were able to hire on our core team, pay them in USDC, we're not just paying them in random tokens. We really wanted to pay them and have this be either a part-time job or a full-time job for them. But now we're sort of getting the community's wider buy-in into what we're doing. And so typically what we'll do is we'll just treat the community at the moment a little bit like a board, where on a weekly basis, we'll have a town hall, we'll share what we're thinking, we'll leave it open for update and comment. And at some point, we'll build advisory boards and councils where people will have a little bit more governance and voting. And again, that's part of the progressive decentralization thing. But at the moment, we're just being as transparent as possible with what we're thinking and how we're thinking about it so that we can get the community's kind of buy-in and excitement along the way.
Just to add on that, there is a model that we are investigating and pitching and catching on right now that I think a lot of us are excited about, which is how do we enable the entrepreneurs in the community to build out business lines for IC, almost similar to what in the App Store today, where if you're an app developer, you can build an app, launch it on the App Store, and then there's a split on the revenue. And how can we implement systems like that where you could scale much faster and also in this kind of decentralized way, have teams going out? For example, we've thought about doing business consulting under the IC brand, where we can help Web2 companies transition into Web3. We've thought about a podcast, for example. We've thought about all sorts of things that would be potentially quite interesting. You don't, as Nick said, you don't succeed as an early stage startup by trying to do 50 things simultaneously. But if we can enable an infrastructure to allow teams of people to go after these various moonshots and under the IC umbrella, that could be really powerful. And it's something that we're strongly considering.
So as we approach close, I want to go back to something, Rockwell, that you said towards the beginning of the podcast. And I'm going to tie it in actually to a conversation I was having with my roommate last night. We were talking about just our financial goals as it pertains to saving. And he talked about how one of the things he wants to build is a $600,000 fund per child for future college prices, which is insane because it's a lot of money and it actually is probably the right amount of money given how fast college tuition has increased. It's totally outpaced inflation and many other categories of housing even and healthcare. And college tuition just goes up so much. But as you said, Nick, at the beginning, free content, library cards, YouTube videos, it's not going to solve this problem. There is this buy-in to a common narrative. There's this community. There's this sort of church replacement that something like a university or an invisible college might be able to offer. And so as we think about price and accessibility, what are the things that you two are thinking about as it relates to scholarships or just enabling folks who don't come from the most privileged backgrounds to still be able to learn and to have that community buy-in as they begin their own Web3 and other journeys?
The NFT is the only way you can access Invisible College. And I don't think that has to be the case, right? The advantage of having the NFT with access to Invisible College is you can sell that NFT and sell that access or rent out that access. And so we think there are a whole bunch of ways that we could help people access without buying in. So it could be that you can rent an NFT from someone, and that can be a way where you can access it where you may not be buying the lifetime value of being there and you may not be able to sell it back to somebody, but you can at least access the courses and content. It could be that when we produce a course, we are offering discounts and scholarships to that course to the public. It could be that we have a subscription model that allows people to access Invisible College by paying a sort of Web2 subscription. It also matters when it comes to accessibility. I actually think that the way colleges do it, where people pay according to their abilities, is probably an okay thing. right? Like being able to give scholarships to people, I think generally kind of makes sense. And it's really about picking the people who are right for scholarships, but like we're already doing that. We already have people. Packy McCormick gave away a scholarship. Christy Tillman gave away a scholarship. And we'll have more people doing that all the time. And so I think we think it's really important that Invisible College stays accessible. And I think that's a full community decision. And so what matters is we have a lot of options for how to do it. I think we'll just have to iterate and figure out which of those is going to be the best for our community.
To add on that too, part of the Web3 ethos is come deliver value and capture a portion of that value so you get paid. So you're constantly playing a positive sum game. The pie is increasing with that. And I think it's very important, regardless of what avenues we pursue to allow people into the community outside of owning an NFT, that they can actually earn ownership in the NFT based on the value that they deliver in the community. And building those pathways for renters to become owners, I think is an important part of the vision. Because I think ownership breeds all sorts of really amazing qualities that you want to learn and you want to embrace. And it's something that I think we want to promote in IC itself.
Great. Nick and Rockwell, thank you both so much for sitting around the campfire with me today. For folks who want to learn more about Invisible College, where's the best place for them to go?
Awesome. Jackson, thanks for having us. This is fun. Rockwell and I have done a bunch of Twitter spaces, but I think this is the first podcast we've gotten to do together. So thanks for making an occasion for this. This is a lot of fun and really pumped about what you guys are doing at Cabin DAO. And I think it's just so cool. You guys are one of the projects that we say when people are asking what cool stuff is happening in Web3, Cabin DAO is just so clearly one of them. I think if you want to learn more about Invisible College, our website is the hub for all of the things that we do. So invisiblecollege.xyz. You can obviously check out our Twitter. I think the best way to follow along with what we're doing is to subscribe to our Substack. If you want to get a sampling of what it's like before you buy an NFT, we're doing this Tokenomics 101 event, and we can post that link in the show notes maybe. And that'll give you a sense for kind of what it's like in there. And then just try to talk to some people in the community. We're on Twitter, it's a loud group. We usually retweet people who are here and just ask them, what is it like? Do you like it there? Would you recommend it? Because that's a question that you need to ultimately ask. And we hope you'll stop by.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take it easy.